Hi everyone! In this video, I want to show you how you can submit your programming assignment to Github Classroom. Now, a common way to do this is using the command line interface to Git. And I have a video showing you step by step how to do this for both an initially empty Github Classroom repository and one where your instructor has provided starter code. So I recommend you check those out if you want to learn how to submit to Github Classroom using the command line. In this video, I'm not going to use the command line. Instead, I'm going to use Xcode. So Xcode is an integrated development environment provided by Apple that's commonly used for app development for iOS and for macOS and Apple TV, etc. So in this video, I'm going to use Xcode. This video is also going to assume that you already have some familiarity with Git and GitHub and just version control in general. So if you haven't worked with Git and GitHub before, I would recommend you check out one of my other videos as well to get up to speed on these tools and why and how to use Git and GitHub for version control. All right, that being said, let's get started. So there are a few steps, only 4, so fear not. But there are a few steps in order to submit your code for grading with Github Classroom. Let's go through each of the steps one at a time with an example. So let's take some notes on the first step. So the first step, number 1. The first step is to accept the assignment. So for each programming assignment in your class, your instructor is going to provide you with a unique link to accept that assignment. Now, I don't have that link for you. You'll have to get it from your instructor. But I do have an example link that we can use for the sake of this video. So I've made a little practice problem called Hello World Classroom that we can click on and go through this video example with. So let's simulate how you would do this for an actual assignment in your class. Somehow you'll get this link from your instructor. You'll click on it. The first time you accept an assignment in a new class with Github Classroom, you'll likely be prompted to choose your name from a roster. Find your name, choose it. If you don't see your name, it's okay. Just click skip this step. And I'd recommend you let your instructor know that you were not included in the roster. Now, your instructor may have starter code for your assignment, which can take some time to import. This example we're going to do today doesn't have any starter code, so this is creating an initially empty repository. So this was pretty fast. Once you see this screen, it says you're ready to go, you've accepted the assignment, Hello World Classroom. Remember, this is just a dummy assignment that I made for us to practice with. You'll see your assignment repo has been created, and you can click on that link to be taken to your repository. Now, hopefully you've seen something like this before. This is kind of the splash page for an empty repository on GitHub with some instructions for how to push some code you have locally up to this remote repo from the command line. Now, we're not going to use the command line in this video. We're instead going to use the graphical user interface or GUI tools in Xcode. So the only thing that we need from this page right now is this link right here, which is the unique URL for this repository. So go ahead and click the copy button here to copy it to your clipboard. We're going to use it soon when we make a connection from a local repo to this remote repo. Before we leave this page and head over to Xcode, I just want to emphasize a little bit about this path up here. So first off, we have the name of your repository, which is automatically created to be the name of the classroom assignment, which, as you know, I called Hello World Classroom, dash your GitHub username. So yours will be named something different because this is my username and yours is different. Now over here, we have the name of the organization that owns this repository. So this is going to be whatever organization your instructor set up, okay? I want to emphasize that this is not going to be your personal GitHub account, okay? Because you're going to be clicking on a link to GitHub Classroom, whatever organization is associated with that GitHub Classroom is going to own the repository. Now, this particular one is private, so it's only accessible from the Gonzaga CPC 315 organization and members within that organization who have access to this repository, which would just be the student, you, and the instructor, me. But that will be different, of course, for your class. All right, that's enough there. Just make sure you copied this URL. All right, let's head over to our notes and start on step 2. We just finished step 1, accept the assignment. Time for step 2. Step 2 is a fun one. Set up your local repository. Now, to do this, we're going to need to use Xcode. So I have the splash page open for Xcode here. Let's click Create a new Xcode project. It doesn't really matter much which template you use for your new project because we're just going to get it up into GitHub and then call it good in this video. So for simplicity, I'm going to simply click on the Mac OS tab and make a command line Swift tool for Mac OS. So Mac OS, command line tool, next. For the product name, this does not have to match the name of your repository on GitHub, but it can if you want it to. I'm going to call this Hello World Classroom. Under organization identifier, make sure you put in some sort of reverse domain name. If you don't have a domain name, then just com.example is sufficient. And then set the language to be Swift or whatever you're most comfortable with. Now on this page, it's going to prompt you to choose a directory or a folder to store this new project. I just put mine in a project folder called Xcode projects. Feel free to choose wherever you'd like. And make sure that under source control, this box is checked. Create Git repository on my Mac. This is going to take that little git init step for you. So it's kind of convenient to just check this box. Let's hit create and give it a few seconds in order to initialize our little Mac OS command line tool project. All right, it looks like it's good to go. So I'm going to open up main.swift just so you can see the automated code that was created. All right. Now in this sidebar over here on the left, okay, we're currently looking at kind of the project navigator. There's a bunch of different navigators up here. The one we want to work with for version control is this second one, Source Control Navigator. And you can choose it by hitting Command 2 on your keyboard, and it's 2 because it's the second navigator. So to flip between these ones would be Command 1 and Command 2. Just kind of a handy shortcut there. All right, so now we have our Source Control Navigator open. Let's expand Hello World Classroom. Let's open branches. So it looks like we already have a master branch. It's our current branch. And if we expand remotes, we don't have any remotes. So now would be a good time to set up our remote repository that we made over here on GitHub. Okay, so recall, we need to have this URL copied to our clipboard. So let's right click on remotes and say add existing remote. And we're choosing add existing remote because we already have a remote repo on GitHub created. It was created when we accepted the GitHub Classroom assignment. All right, we can leave the default name of origin for our remote. And now we're simply going to paste that link to our GitHub remote repository. And click add. And just like that, we've effectively done our git remote add origin command that we would have typed at the command line. All right, it looks like we have our local repository already set up. Checking that box in the File Explorer dialog, ran git init for us. We can see if we double click on our master branch that Xcode went ahead and already created an initial commit for us. We've set up our remote. Here it is, right here, origin. And now we're moving on to step 3, push a commit to your remote repo. So for us, our remote repo is on GitHub. We've already made the connection between our local repository and our remote repository when we added this origin remote here. So now we just need to make a push. So let's head back over to main.swift and let's just make a change so we can see kind of the add, commit, and push process from beginning to end. So I'm going to simply say something like another print statement. Just make some sort of change to one of your files, like main.swift. Now we've made a change to main.swift, saved the file, and we can see over here that there's an M now, standing for modified, in our project navigator next to our main.swift. So this is Xcode letting you know that it is tracking the changes in the files in this project. Now, let's say we're ready to commit this change. A really handy keyboard shortcut to keep in mind when working with Git and version control in Xcode is the commit shortcut, which is Command-Option-C. And if you ever forget that, you can always go up to source control in your menu bar and see that commit right here has its keyboard shortcut, Command-Option-C. And this is just nice to know because here's some other commands that you can use related to version control. All right, so let's do Command-Option-C. And I'm going to just add another print statement as my commit message. Okay, you can see that there's this nice text box down here that has a hint of enter commit message here. And this is where we write our descriptive commit message for these changes. Some other things to note about this really nice commit dialog is on the left, you'll be able to check or uncheck any files that you want to be included for staging and committing with this commit. Since we only have one file that's been changed, main.swift, Xcode has properly checked a box there saying, yeah, let's include this file, but we could uncheck it if we want. You'll also be able to see any changes here when you click on a file, which can help you see what are the changes that are about to be committed in this file. So that's really clever and really helpful as well. Now, before we press commit, we can actually do kind of like 3 commands at once if we check this box, right? We check push to remote, then it's going to push to origin master and create the master branch, since it doesn't exist because we haven't pushed to this repository yet. So this is really kind of like the git add for staging files over here. This is really like the git commit for adding a script message here. And this is really like push right here in order to check this box and make sure this commit goes all the way through to our remote. So now I'm going to press commit one file and push. All right, I'm being prompted to sign into my GitHub account because this repository is a private repository in an organization that I need to authenticate with in order to push to. All right, easy enough. So I'm going to enter in my GitHub account, and you should enter in your GitHub account as well. Press sign in. This is a brief interjection in my original video to show Xcode 11.7 and newer versions where authentication with GitHub has changed slightly. Before, in the older versions, you'd be able to enter your username and password, But now Xcode and GitHub wants you to provide your account, which is just your GitHub username, and a personal access token. So this token part is a little bit different. Thankfully, there's this blue link here that says create a personal access token that you can click, and it'll bring you to this page to explain what a personal access token is and how to create one. I want to walk you through how to create one. So go ahead and sign into your GitHub, and on your home page in the upper right corner, click your icon and then click Settings. On your Settings page, go ahead and scroll down until you see Developer Settings on the left sidebar. In Developer Settings, there are 3 options in the sidebar on the left. We want personal access tokens. You may already have some personal access tokens, and if you do, that's great. I would encourage you to make a new one specifically for this purpose of use with Xcode. That's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click Generate New Token, and we're going to be prompted to enter in a note and a scope. So the note should just describe what the token will be used for. So this is going to be used for Xcode on my 13-inch MacBook Pro, and you can see I've also made a note about an Xcode on 15-inch MacBook Pro token. So the description just helps kind of differentiate what your tokens are used for. Next, we need to select the scopes that define what the token is going to be used for. Well, all we need to do is check this checkbox right next to repo, saying that this personal access token can be used to have full control of private repositories. That's all we have to do. Scroll down to the bottom and click Generate Token. As you can see with this blue box right here, it says make sure to copy your personal access token now. You won't be able to see it again. Be sure to copy that personal access token right now so that you don't lose it. Once it's on your clipboard, let's head back over to Xcode. Now we can enter in our account, which is just your GitHub username, and paste that personal access token that we just got from GitHub. Click Sign In. All right, that looks like everything went well. That's it for this brief interjection. Back to the main video. All right, it looks like everything went through. That M is gone. The modified little icon here is gone next to main.swift. If I head over to the version control editor and I click on my master branch, I see that I have 2 commits here, and this second one did end up going to the origin master branch. So this is my remote. Okay, so this is the state of both of my branches. Local and remote is on this commit. If I head over to GitHub and refresh the page, now I'm going to see all of those files show up in GitHub. Clicking on main.swift, and here we see another print statement. So this is an example of how you can use the graphical user interface tools in Xcode in order to commit code locally and push a commit all the way up to GitHub. And specifically, we're working with Github Classroom. So you can see how you can submit your assignment by committing and pushing in Xcode to Github Classroom. So this brings us to the last step of our 4-step process for submitting an assignment to GitHub Classroom. We've just proved that we can successfully push a commit to GitHub. So now that we have this workflow all set up, the last step is to continue working. So work on your project in Xcode, make changes, save your files, commit your files, and then push those commits to GitHub. Now, a few things that I want to point out. When you enter your credentials in Xcode for GitHub, Xcode is going to save those. If you go to Xcode Preferences, head over to Account and click on GitHub, and you'll be able to see that Xcode did in fact save your GitHub credentials, so you won't have to enter those in again, which is really nice. Should you need to add another account or delete an account, you can use the plus and minus icons down here. There's also the source control tab in the preferences where you can change some of the settings. for just general source control in Xcode. If you click on the Git tab, then you can change, things like the author name or author email for specifically Git. Something else to note is if you work with a git ignore file, you can add a git ignore file just like you would for any other project. In fact, there's a swift.gitignore that you can go find on the GitHub git ignore repository page. Or you can just come here and use the graphical user interface to add ignored files that you don't want to be included under version control. So this is kind of a nice way to make these changes at kind of the global level instead of on an individual project level with kind of that .gitignore file. So that's something to keep in mind here. Another thing I'd like to point out is how to make sure that your code was successfully pushed, because this is how you're going to be turning in your assignment, right? So you want some sort of like confirmation that your code has been kind of quote received. Well, always head over to your assignment page on GitHub and refresh it and make sure that the last commit is in fact the one that you want graded. Click around, look at the code, make sure it's good. I also encourage you to go one step further and do what I call pretend to be the grader. So your grader or your instructor for your course, they need to get your code down locally or on some sort of machine in order to run it, right? So in order to do that, they're going to clone your code, right? They're going to open an Xcode, grab the URL, clone it. They're going to do something in order to get your code on their machine so they can run it. Well, you should do that too, right? Go ahead and click open with Xcode or grab this URL right here, open up a terminal, type git clone, paste this URL, and open that fresh copy of your remote GitHub repo locally and test it. If everything works when you pretend to be the grader, it should work when the actual grader grades your assignment. So that would be my last kind of piece of advice here is pretend to be the grader. Make sure that everything's good when you clone this and you should be good to go. All right, well that concludes the video. Last parting words, make sure you push early and push often so that you always have a good backup of your work. And check out some other videos of mine if you want to learn how to use the command line to submit to Github Classroom, or if you want to check out how you can get started with a project or an assignment that isn't initially empty like the one we saw here. Sometimes your instructor has starter code, and then you're going to have to clone first instead of push to an empty repository. So check out my other videos for that. Thanks for watching.